Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Imperial HoloNet. I'm GID123, and today I'm joined by Red Lear and Tillies and Connor Nielsen. And we are going to do a comic book review today. We are going to review Batman Zero Year. Dun dun dun. That's right, New 52's Batman, written by the one and only Scott Snyder himself. So, let us begin. How about we start with you, Red, being our Batman person? Give us a little insight historically and what your thoughts were.
Well, Connor was the one reading the book at the time.
Well, Connor, if
I
you want to go
actually
first.
got into this right after, like literally the issue after 0 Year ended. So yeah, start with Connor.
Okay, Connor, how about you start us off? This is your thing.
Batman Zero Year was a comic book arc that ran from Batman number, what is it? I'm looking around for these. I want to say 24 was the first issue.
It does not say it on the back of the trade. That is
I'm looking
bad
through
design.
Batman number, it's right here. Sorry, Batman number 21 through 24. That took a break, and then it was number 25 through 27, and then 29 through 33. This was New 52 Batman by Scott Snyder and art by Greg Capullo. This was the first time inker Danny McKee was on the book before he was taking over the duties from Jonathan Glapion. They did a two-parter story before this, but this was really his first big story arc. And FCO Placencia doing the colors. This was the art team for the rest of the New 52 title. This came out, the first issue hit in June of 2013, and then it wrapped up in sometime in 2014. I read this book, I picked up the very first issue the day after I graduated from high school. And this book has a very special place in my heart. This was a book that I was not excited for whatsoever. I loved Court of the Owls when I read it. I still like Court of the Owls, even though I recognize how derivative it is. I really liked, what's it called? Death of the Family when it was coming out. I still kind of like that book. But this one has been one of those things where I got into comics through the New 52. And especially Scott Snyder's Batman really caught my attention. And I think that at the time when they said they were doing an origin story, I was so not looking forward to it. I resisted it, and it took me a while to come around on it, but I really did come around on it by the time issue 24, the final issue of the first chunk of the story, because this is divided into three story arcs. The first four issues are Secret City. The second four issues is Dark City, and then the third chunk of four issues is Savage City. So by the time the fourth one had wrapped up, I was blown away. I was floored. I still contend that Batman number 24 is one of my favorite issues of a comic book ever. And I don't think it ever quite reaches the heights of that first story arc, but I still love this story. And I can say, on a mostly subjective level, this is my favorite Batman story. So that's what I'll say about this book.
Okay, Red, how about you go next?
Yeah, I again got into the book with, which issue was it? Graveyard Shift. So I sadly missed out because I wanted to get in during 0 Year. In fact, I saw on the shelf because I was buying trades at the time the cover with Batman fighting the tigers, and it was lions. And so I was like, oh man, I want to read that, but it's already deep in. Finally had to wait till it came out in trades, but I have the hardbacks, and I just was really blown away by this the first time I read it because I bought both volumes, I think, at the same time. And what's so great about it is I can see Batman's origin over and over and over again. Like, I'm okay with every single writer who works on the character doing an issue for the origin. I just don't know why, but I love seeing it. I don't know why. I just like seeing kids get orphaned. It's weird. But
the way that folks. Red likes seeing kids get orphaned. That's why he loved the beginning of Rogue One so much.
If guns are involved, then he's doubly invested.
Oh yeah, I was so upset that we didn't see like a cylinder fly out of the blaster pistol and like hit the ground and something like that. That was amazing.
Lyra was
like
wearing a necklace and the beads just fell off.
a bunch of kyber crystals and they start falling into puddles and stuff. Yeah. Uh,
You hear this ominous voice in the background that says, "The strongest hearts are made of kyber."
But what really worked about this story was it's the one Snyder story that I feel doesn't try and reinvent the wheel, and yet it's the one that also I think kind of is reinventing the wheel the most, but it doesn't act like it's this grand, like, gonna change everything event, yet at the same time it does change everything, but it knows it's another Batman origin. It just focuses on telling an entertaining story. It knows it's derivative of other origins and parts, and it wears that on its sleeve. And I think that's why I reacted to it so positively when I didn't to the other Snyder stuff when I go back to it, because it's just so like he knows he's doing the Miller "I shall become a bat" scene, and he does it in a unique way. And the reason it works is because he's openly acknowledging I am riffing this and doing something slightly different. And so you're kind of just going on a journey with Snyder, recapturing that nostalgia for Year One and for Untold Tales and Legends of the Dark Knight and all that stuff, and Killing Joke and all that and all those stories. But it doesn't feel like, look at me, I can do references. It feels, again, just more like a journey through memory lane in a really interesting way, and especially because it is a flashback to early days of Batman. And it feels different, though, in a fresh way, but it doesn't feel like it's bragging about that. It just has a unique theme. And in a lot of ways, especially with that second volume, and specifically with Salvage City, they begin to really get what Scott Snyder's Batman is. Because he's kind of just been writing vague Morrison-esque Bruce really since the beginning of his book, and I don't know if it really works that well. Here's where he really decides what his Batman is. He's this punk kid. I think Steve always calls him like punk, or Alex always calls him punk rock Batman, and he's completely right. And that's not really the Batman I would prefer, but I love the fact that it isn't something I would enjoy specifically. It's its own thing, and it just feels so different, but non like a paving over everything and creating something new. Just it's taken its own path and it's just content with that.
So
and
I have right before Joel gets in here, I have a question for you then. So Scott Snyder is more like, you say the punk rock Batman. I agree. And I would also kind of call him more of the heavy metal Batman, but I don't want to imply the actual comic magazine heavy metal. But do you think maybe some of this interpretation of Batman comes from knowing Greg Capullo, who is very much like, you just take one look at him, he looks like a biker, and he listens to heavy metal all the time, and he has done album covers for Disturbed and Korn and stuff. So do you think some of this comes from knowing Greg Capullo? And I think it does, and that's why I always call this Snyder and Capullo's Batman, because I think the Capullo influence really comes in, especially in this story.
Oh yeah, I mean, his book looks even more Spawn. His art looks even more Spawn-esque here than it feels like. Then Spawn was a very like metal kind of book. That character overall is very 90s, and this feels a lot like. And I haven't went back to many interviews, but I vaguely remember Snyder talking about Capullo having a much bigger influence on this one than previous ones, or at least I would assume that would be the case, because later in the run they seem to be more directly working together.
Oh, you done, Red, or did you want to say something else before?
I'm done.
Okay, so for me, first off, I think everybody here, I'm gonna be the outsider of the group. For like, you guys are more into comics than I am, and you gotta understand the way I get comics. First off, is mostly in trade since I have a bookstore. Sadly, no comic shop nearby where I can walk to. And also, I don't think this is like my first. I read other Batman comics way beforehand. Like I have Killing Joke, Year One, Dark Knight Returns. I mean, Nightfall. So I kind of came into this kind of late. In fact, I think I brought this because we were going to review this eventually, and we just never got around to it. So the review is kind of more the reason I read it. But so I kind of read some of the classic top tier Batman stories already. So when I read this, I'm gonna sound like I hate it, but I don't. I wasn't completely like blown away with it, same way I was like with Killing Joke or Nightfall or stuff like that. But I will say, much like Red said when we were talking about this on Twitter, it is a good story, and I think that's its strongest asset is that it's a good story. It's a good Batman origin story. I did recognize a lot of like, okay, this is like a little bit like Year One. This is a little bit like Killing Joke. This is like Dark Knight Rises with the whole No Man's Land situation by the end of it. Um, and I did enjoy the character Batman. I like seeing him as a kid a lot. Back when he and his dad and his mom were alive and stuff. Well, him and his mom and dad were alive, and just seeing him and his dad interact. Fixing the car, and his dad asking him, like, what does Gotham City mean to you, and just him exploring that sort of innocence. So I did like it overall. I did like it. I just don't think like you guys have more of a passion for it than I did. But overall, I would say this is definitely a really good, solid story. And I enjoyed it. And Doctor Death is nightmare fuel. That is my final word on that. So Connor, how about you take us somewhere next?
Okay, so my big read on this is really the turning point of the Scott Snyder Batman. What happened here was we got several big things here. Let's talk. There's two particularly big things. One in the art design and one in the writing. I'm going to start with the art design, and all this is from a purely intentional point of view from Snyder. He wanted to make the anti-Year One. He said we can't go the more crime-centric, gritty route because we can't do that. They've already made the definitive gritty Batman origin story, and it's called Year One. We can't do that. In fact, we're going to try to do the complete opposite of Year One. We're going to make the anti-Year One. So that's why it's called 0 Year. It's not Year Zero because they're flipping it around, just intentional. I think that's a little bit weird, but anyways. So what they talk about is the colors here are so bright. There's a lot of oranges and purples and mixtures of yellows and oranges and purples and blues, and it has this very not traditional Batman color palette to it. It's very dynamic, and it really catches the eye. And FCO Placencia really deserves a lot of credit for the amount of colors he's able to incorporate here while also making it look like a comprehensive, cohesive visual style. I think that is something that is incredible. I also think Danny McKee's art really adds a more dynamic flavor here than Jonathan Glation's more moody inks provided in the earlier Capullo Snyder stories.
Right.
And that more dynamic inking style, I think, does add to the more action sci-fi elements that they are leaning on in regards to this origin story.
I would
Now,
definitely
that's
say
the
that.
art side.
I would definitely say that this origin is definitely a lot more, as I would put it, fantastical. Like, you
Yes,
got costume
and
villains, you got the Riddler showing up early, you got evil dead skeleton people.
yeah, and the writing aspect, and this took me a little bit while I was reading it. It wasn't until I reread after the fourth issue came out. I reread all of those 4 issues back to back to back to back, which is the Secret City portion. There is no inner monologue, and that is something that I think took a lot of restraint, and it took balls on the part of Snyder. He's really giving Capullo and his art team a big bone and giving a lot of he's putting a lot of faith in those people to really tell his story in a visual manner. But it also takes guts because this is a guy who clearly likes dialogue. He likes writing. He likes explaining stuff to the audience. And whether you like that or not, your mileage may vary. I actually much prefer this. This Batman doesn't tell you what he's thinking through inner monologue. This Batman doesn't even know what he's thinking because he's not really Batman yet. And what this does is it allows the visual storytelling to really take hold, and it allows the art to breathe. And it is such, it feels like, it does feel like a part of Snyder's Batman run, but this feels more timeless, it feels more elevated, and it makes it feel like more like a classic. Like, this is something I'm going to go back in because I remember how the art breathed and the restraint on the writing portion. And we don't even really get an inner monologue until he's walking down the alleyways in Savage City, and he's kind of doing like a voice recording, and that's the first time we get any sort of inner monologue, and it feels so earned, and it's this big monumental moment because as he's giving his first inner monologue, it is the time where he's really realizing what Snyder's basically explaining what his Batman means. And, you know, Snyder's Batman is the Batman that screws up, but can get better. And that's what, and you know what, that's actually my Batman. I know a lot of people don't like a Batman that screws up. Actually, that's the way I like it, because otherwise he's just Superman in a black cape. That's the biggest problem I have with Tom King's Batman, is it feels like I'm just reading Superman, but in a black cape. Which I know is controversial to say, but I'm not the biggest fan.
Well, with the King thing, I think the point there is more supposed to be that no one... Well, it's more a matter of he has to be Bat-God, so he does screw up, but he makes it into a... He makes you think he doesn't. It's that Morrison thing of... You know, when Joker says, every time I think outside of the box, he builds a bigger box. Batman is the god of his world. He's the king of hell. And he recontextualizes everything to fit into his image. And, of course, I think that works better in Morrison's run than King's, because Morrison has the whole thing of R.I.P. is a giant play. It's a storybook, and so you kind of... The meta elements are more on the sleeve of the book. You know, like wearing it on its sleeve, while King, as much as I love him, maybe needs to fix that a little bit more.
Right. But going back to 0 Year, there's a big, like, I see this as a turning point where I honestly see this as like Baby Bear. This is the sweet spot. Because I feel like after 0 Year, like, I don't want to say this went to his head, but he really found something he wanted to do and really paved his own way. And that's not particularly the way I wanted this story to go. And with the likes of Endgame and then the super heavy stuff, it was leaning into a way, and it kind of got carried away with more of the sci-fi fantastical elements and did a lot of explaining and talking. And I think that kind of went overboard, and I think it kind of went off the rails. And while at the same time, I don't think Court of Owls and Death of the Family were quite ambitious enough, this was the perfect balance of the two sides of Snyder's Batman. And I love this story.
The way you describe it, Connor, this is going to sound so funny. Scott Snyder's sounding a lot like Stephen Moffat right now, and 0 Year is season 5 of Doctor Who. I feel like some of that...
All right.
Red, you know what I'm probably talking about. I wish Deadpool Zilla were here, he'd know.
This kind of does feel like it. I mean, the just reinvention of the character and whatnot, and then afterwards spiraling with weird Endgame, and then Super Heavy being the garbage campfire that it is.
But yeah, Red, where do you want to take us? How about you take us somewhere?
I think back to the thing Connor was talking about with the narration. I didn't catch that, but my point I was going to bring up previously was how much more this book lets you breathe, because it doesn't have speechifying, and now I realize exactly why that is, because it doesn't have the narration. My big problem with Snyder is the giant walls of text in so many of his books, where it just gets tedious to read at a certain point, where, you know, you can pretty much solve everything that's happening either through, you know, just the visuals or a handful of, you know, sentences, and he just piles it on and on and on. It's a bit of a problem in Court of Owls. Death Family suffers from it. Endgame heavily suffers from it more than probably anything. I've heard that about his All-Star run as well. And this book, like, there's maybe 2 or 3 points where it gets a little tedious. I think the Tokyo Moon thing, as cool as the idea is, gets a little bit problematic with just how he's spelling it out too much. But the big thing that I think works about a lot of this is the Riddler, and specifically the fact that Snyder has this habit of spouting off fun facts over and over and over again, to the point that it feels like he's just reciting an encyclopedia, and it doesn't feel natural, and almost feels a bit more like bragging than anything. And here it actually fits because the Riddler and Batman are bragging. They are trying to upstage one another. And so when Riddler's like talking about where certain words come from and what they mean in Greek and stuff like that, it works because that's the Riddler. Like in previous books, Batman would do that constantly. Endgame is the most laughable situation with the Joker's name, Eric Border, and like, oh, look, it's like King of Laughs or whatever, and it's just this big freaking 5 pages of explaining what the whole thing of just like, look how smart I am. And it is smart, but he piles it on. Here, it fits Riddler, and I feel like it was a stroke of brilliance to, do that here. And it kind of feels like Snyder understanding how tedious some of that could be in the earlier stuff and owning it in a really cool way.
Speechifying for me has always kind of been one of those. I mean, as someone who likes to write with dialogue as well, because if you ever read my stories, I love having people talk. But I think you need a good balance. Like, I feel like if you speechify too much, then you're not making a character. Unless, like, that character's like a force of nature type. Obviously, you don't want to be pretentious or anything, but if you, like, just have them, like, every word of them is just a giant speech, then that's not a very interesting character.
Some characters, though, are just giant speeches. I mean, let's face it, Silver Surfer has built an entire character upon pontificating aimlessly.
Well, I feel like with some characters it works, and others it doesn't. Like Silver Surfer, it probably works if done well. And Heath Ledger's Joker, I would say probably is another one, because he's more of a force of nature than... Well, he's a character and a force of nature.
Well, Batman is a force of nature.
I mean that too.
I do feel like some of, again, Bruce's speeches here, about like he does like 2 different speeches on why Gotham's so awesome. And not to pull the Tom King fanboy card, but I'm totally going to pull the Tom King fanboy card. He sums up all of that in like 3 pages at the beginning of, I think it's issue 3 of I Am Gotham, with the, like, when you relate to living Gotham and the smoke and piss of it all. That whole speech, in a more human way, he breaks down everything Snyder has ever said about Gotham. And I like how Snyder describes Gotham. When I first got into Batman stuff, I'll be honest, Snyder was my favorite writer when I started reading Batman. And it got to a point where reading people like Morrison, who either found a better way to speechify, or people like Dixon, who could make things very much the bare essentials of what they needed to say and leave a lot of it up to very basic short sentences, made me start to dislike that. But this book shows that you can write like Snyder and do it correctly. It can work, just not always. And again, I think Connor's right with the narration being cut being a very effective way to do that. Make sure that Batman only says what needs to be said.
One thing that I think that really does make these creative risks pay off in a big way is DC basically said, we're going to do the New 52 Batman origin story. That's just going to happen. Snyder and Capullo, do you guys want to do it? And Snyder said, no, I can't top year 1, so I don't want to do it. This is at least from what I understand. And then then to his knowledge, he realized that if he didn't do it, they were just going to go to someone else. And he'd been writing this Batman since the beginning, and he didn't want whoever to come on in. Not that he didn't trust them, but he had a very specific idea of what his Batman went through and why he is the way he is. He didn't know the exact story that led him to it, but in his head, the Batman is a very specific person, and he didn't want whatever origin story came to be incompatible with the Batman he had been writing for like 2 years, and I understand that. So he said, yes, I will take that job. We're going to do the Batman origin story. And he had to really, I think, justify to himself why he was even doing this and why what was even the point of revisiting this origin and how he was going to approach it. So, Red, when you talk about, I think both of you guys have mentioned that, you too, Joel, where the where it feels like he's understanding and reverential of the previous origins, to the point where, when they're doing homage and they're doing like references to other things, it feels like the way, like to put this into filmmaking terms, when Edgar Wright references stuff, like if you've seen Baby Driver, there are references to the Blues Brothers, Wild at Heart, Blue Velvet, and plenty other films, but they don't feel like we're stopping the movie to reference this. I mean, it's not like Agents of Shield, right? This is like when we have like the Blue Velvet reference. There's a part where Jamie Foxx says, "Hey, let's go over to this diner. We're going for a ride." So they go for a ride, and it's very unpredictable, and you're kind of scared of Jamie Foxx. And then I thought, wow, this really reminds me of that part from Blue Velvet where that movie takes a detour, and the character Frank Booth is like in charge, and he's really scary. And then right in when I thought that in Baby Driver, it shows a shot of the road that is lifted straight from Blue Velvet. So I went, oh, that's an intentional reference. But it doesn't feel like we're stopping the movie to reference Blue Velvet. It feels like, hey, this does kind of feel familiar, right? Hey, let's give a little reference to add to the scene. And I think Synder does it similarly. Like, for example, when Batman is doing the "Yes, Father, I Shall Become a Bat" sequence, or when they are referencing the likes of
the tightrope from TKR.
Yeah, the tightrope, or the I just had one.
Classic Batman cover where he Batman.
Yeah, the Detective 27.
Yeah, Detective. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, when we're doing Detective 27, when we're doing the No Man's Land thing, when we're referencing so much classic Batman material here, especially with like Killing Joke with the Red Hood and all that sort of stuff. It feels like a celebration of the classics, as opposed to, hey, buy this because there's references to classics here. And that is what makes me so happy to read it as a Batman fan, is it feels like a celebration of all things Batman as we're starting the new Batman. And I think that's the key to why I enjoy this so much.
I mean, one of the best ones, the fact that when you really get down to it in this, the first actual supervillain Batman faces is Dr. Death, who was the first supervillain he faced in the comics.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's an awesome reference.
Dr. Death is nightmare fuel in this book.
They totally reinvented that character in such a way. And I'm okay with that, because he's a character who literally appeared twice in the Golden Age back-to-back, then in a two-parter in, like, I own the second part, I think it's from, like, 1984, and then he cameo in War Games, and a cameo in, what was the Black Mask arc, where he has everything trapped? Hold on. Life After Death. In Life After Death, he shows up, I think, for like 5 seconds there. I might be wrong. And that's it. And he shows up in, I think, one issue of Batgirl. And it's like nothing more than that. And so Snyder really does reinvent him and make him interesting. And take a character who's just been completely bare bones his entire existence and actually make him pretty sympathetic and totally change his gimmick, but in a fascinating way.
In a horrifying way. I just keep looking at the pictures like, oh, that's disgusting. That's the one thing that did stick out for me. Dr. Death.
Yeah, Greg Capullo has a field day with the capabilities of Dr. Death.
Just like the way the bones and spines like sticking out and the teeth.
Yeah, I really like the way. So Snyder comes from a background in horror comics, right? With American Vampire.
That's what a lot of people
I think
say.
he was doing Witches, I think, at around this time. I can't remember when he and Jock did Witches, but yeah, he has a history, and I think he was a student of Stephen King. I might be wrong on that one, but I think I heard that he was a student of Stephen King. Stephen King allegedly co-wrote American Vampire for a while with Scott Snyder. So that was really neat that he was able to incorporate some of his previous identity in horror comics with Dark City, while also still kind of playing into the more sci-fi fantastical elements that he's been playing with in this the rest of this story.
Now all I can think of is hoping that there are It references in anything he written with the Joker.
There might be. There might be.
Let's see. Connor, how about you take us to the next place? If there's...
All right, so I guess we can start talking about this in story arc chunks.
Sure.
I think Secret City is one of the best explorations of identity that I've seen in a Batman comic. Though I really like how we start off with. We were doing a similar like Batman Begins thing, right? This does pull quite a bit from Batman Begins. I like that he's not living at Wayne Manor. He's essentially this is a really cool way of reflecting that he's rejecting the name of Wayne. He's rejecting the Wayne identity. He's trying to create his own identity separate from Bruce Wayne while still being Bruce Wayne. But at the same time, he's also wearing different masks. He's wearing all these different latex masks for all these different jobs, and he's trying to basically kill the Bruce Wayne identity by not going to the Wayne Manor, by wearing different faces, and when he is all by himself, he's just pushing his brain to being able to do different capabilities. So that's one element of the story that really captivates me on rereads, and how the Wayne Industries and Uncle Philip, and how he rejects that as well.
And one of the best things is that he's at a brownstone in Crime Alley. Like, almost Bruce Wayne died there, and just Batman's left over, just the angry little kid. And so, of course, the whole point being he has to let Bruce Wayne live. Actually work through the pain, which is the whole point of the absolutely brilliant thing in Savage City with the electroshock therapy.
I think one of my favorite moments in this arc is just the flashback with him and his dad, and he's talking about why he loves Gotham, and I have the quote right here, because it could be a place where you can be anyone, where I can be not Bruce Wayne. I mean, nobody knows who I am there, not like at school. The city lets me be anyone I want to. And Bruce Wayne's dad says, well, who did the city tell you to be today? I don't know. No one really. I don't know, I just really like that scene.
Yeah, and I love the fact that the whole point of the story essentially becomes, he needs to become content with being Bruce Wayne. He doesn't want to, even as a kid. And that realization of, he needs to stop running and just accept who he is as a person, and, constantly trying to destroy his pain and whatnot and get rid of it. And finally, he just becomes both people, and that's so effective.
Yeah, we also have him fighting the Red Hood gang, who are people that wear masks, who are wealthy, rich Gothamites. Not even just wealthy people, just any kind of Gothamite that has some kind of dirt on them. But the thing is, they're all covering their faces too, but they're covering it with the identity of the Red Hood, not any particular face. It's a faceless mask. And that's all in service of, Red Hood 1, who has this big fishbowl, and you only see half of his face, and he's what I really like is he needs to create a mask that has an identity, that when you look at it, you know what it means, but not as a means of concealment, putting on a mask that does show others your identity. And I think having the Red Hood gang as his adversaries in Secret City, and it's called Secret City. Everyone's trying to, it's about the secrets you're hiding, and I think these first 4 issues are as perfect a comic book as monthly comics I've read. So I don't have really any issues with this opening 4-issue story arc. What do you guys think of the idea of masks?
You have no issues with these issues. No, I like the idea.
Yeah, I absolutely love Secret City. I mean, it's really clever at recontextualizing stuff. I love the fact that Uncle Philip is back, because for those who don't know, in Earth 2, Uncle Philip is actually Bruce's legal guardian, because Alfred was not around until Bruce was an adult. And it's nice how they kind of work with that, and the Kane chemical stuff. the way they handle the Red Hood mystery is just freaking awesome.
Sorry.
Like the fact that what was his name? The Liam Distal, who was like apparently maybe the original Red Hood, but he's dead now, and so we have the whole setup of if the Joker is the Red Hood, then he was either some random guy who was shoved in, and I like the fact that they lend credence to that. With as they're fighting, he's not smiling and is genuinely scared, and he only smiles when he's about to hit it. And so if that was just some random other Red Hood who was shoved in there in those final moments, it's kind of like he becomes the Joker as his body hits the acid because he realizes the sick black joke that is life, the whole killing joke idea, and so it works on any level there.
Oh, I didn't notice
do
that.
Personally prefer.
I
I do
tried-
Yeah.
personally prefer the idea that it is just some other Red Hood guy who he shoved in.
Yeah, I like that too. One thing that's really neat though is that whole. Okay, I'm gonna geek out about the whole final like showdown where Batman fights in the Ace Chemical. That whole thing is the most thrilling, dynamic, well orchestrated, well thought out action scene I've ever read in a comic book. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I cannot think of anything that matches this. And the way the detail Capullo puts on faces, and like just as you said, Red, you have to go back and look at the way this person reacts visually in order to pick up on these clues.
Oh, you're right. I'm looking back right now, like, he's more of a scaredy cat than he is like a crazy thug that he was in the previous issues.
Mm-hmm. The moment Batman goes after him, he screams. It again only laughs a little bit, and it can almost be seen as if he's playing a part, but just the whole thing. Batman, he's not really Batman yet. He's still just playing a part.
I really like how the idea of people saw Batman take away Bruce Wayne. Mm-hmm. So that whole idea that Batman and Bruce Wayne are separate entities is ingrained into the very mythology that he's building right now. I think that's so cool. I also think that the stuff we do with the stairway and
that's the best.
Fun. It's so fun and it's smart too. Like it is these two creators that just basically got through the hard stuff, and now they just have to make a spectacle of a fight scene, and this is basically them celebrating after. I see it as them celebrating after, basically, now that they finished doing the origin, they do a celebration of a climax to their story.
I love the fact that Batman takes down 4 of them, and the other 4 just take themselves out.
Yeah, that's great.
I think one of my favorite scenes is when the Red Hood's escaping and he says, "So long, bats." It's like, that's supposed to be a reference to, like, the Mark Hamill Joker. I call them bats all the time. I can just hear Mark Hamill.
Probably.
I mean, every Joker does that.
True, but I can always just hear Mark Hamill's voice when they say bats.
Yeah, speaking of hearing, I hear music when I read this. Like, music plays in my head as I'm reading this, and that rarely happens when I read a comic.
I was going to, but decided against the Gear 1 theme. And actually, that would have fit so well, because it has such a rock part to it.
Is that the animated movie?
Oh, yes, the Christopher Drake one. The score, I mean. One weird thing, though, is I don't like Thomas without a mustache.
Oh.
And it's on the bust, too. It just bugs me. Especially because when Alfred has that vision of possible future Bruce, like that daydream, he has the classic Thomas Wayne mustache.
Yeah.
When I first read this, I was like, I had to check, who's the mechanic guy? Like, I always remember Thomas Wayne being always very sophisticated.
It's like, man, hair really, really helped. Like, it was much different early on.
Oh, yeah.
The hunchbackness didn't set on until years later. Also, I just love the gadgets throughout this. We get the proto blades on the gauntlets. We get the shoes that help him climb up, like on the bottom of a blimp, and we get the blimps, and we get a good reason for why Gotham wouldn't be as blimp happy later, because
Yeah.
the fucking blimp crashes into a building.
I like how in Dark City we have an excuse for the blimps. Are you guys there?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Sorry, we just.
Okay. Yeah, because it's like, well, we're all out of power. We can't exactly use like planes and helicopters and stuff. We got to use the blimps. I think that's really cool. One thing though, as I like that this story requires to be told in the comic book format, and it justifies itself on an artistic level. Like I really like the whole page that is like that. The Ouroboros board game, the ancient Egyptian board game.
Oh, that was the best.
That is intense, and the way the way they place each of the pieces is it requires you to read the not requires you. You start subconsciously reading the words faster and faster and faster, and then you get to the end of it, and then you turn the page. And you're out of the conversation, and all of a sudden it's a lot less intimate. The way they use small panels in close quarters, and it really does simulate a very intense, intimate conversation in a manner that is specific for the comic book form. It is using layouts and panels in a brilliant way.
Another side note is I like the fact that for the final confrontation, Red Hood has a cape. Like, because Batman exists, he has to get more theatrical.
I know that's like I like it just because
like
it's
some
a
presentation, and I love that. Like, the reinvention of the Red Hood gang is probably the smartest thing Snyder did in his entire run.
I like it just because it's a reference, just because it's a reference to the old comic where he did have a cape. He did have a cape, right?
Sure he did. Yeah, he did. I know for a fact he did.
Okay, good. Also, I like seeing early Batcave with just like laptops.
Well, not a laptop, the fucking massive screen. Batman's not too subtle, Alfred. That is the best line.
So I'm going to geek out about the art a little bit more.
Sure.
The third issue jumps between 3 different points in time, and the only way to really discern is through the color palette. And it's never confusing. You're always aware where you are, and it's able to jump. And the way it jumps between the 3 time points is very natural. This is a very smart control over narrative that Snyder has here. And the way he trusts Capullo, and especially FCO Placencia. FCO Placencia is really the star of this issue. And I don't have much to add to that particular issue besides I love the way the colors tell the story, especially what point of the story you're reading. And I like the fractured narrative because Bruce just got beaten to hell. And he's all like dizzy and disoriented, and I think that's awesome.
So we were talking about the arcs a little bit. Do you want to get to the next one with Dr. Death?
Sure. Unless you guys had anything to say about Secret City.
Red, do you hear?
They have an election for Mayor Haiti.
Mayor Haiti.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, Mayor Haiti was a pre-existing Kappa character. He was a mayor.
Okay, which comic book? When did he first start popping up?
He was created by Tony Daniel. He shows up first in Detective Comics Volume 2, Issue 4. So he's the mayor in the New 52.
Yeah, I thought so. He was all over the New 52 when he first popped up.
Yeah, I think he had a role in Dark Knight.
Possibly.
I tried not to go back to that early stuff.
Yeah, Detective Comics was horrible. Oh, it was so bad. Oh my god, yeah. So, did you guys have anything else to say about Secret City?
I think Secret City was my favorite of all the arcs. Just myself.
Mm-hmm.
I am inclined to agree with you.
Next one is
Well, let's move on to Bright New Yesterday, which is the Zero issue,
Oh, that's
and
right.
Tomorrow. Just really briefly, there's some continuity stuff with Bright New Yesterday. Like, people know Bruce Wayne is in Gotham, and there's like a setup for the Red Hood gang going to bomb him that doesn't get picked up on because this was done before the book actually started. But just a nice little story. But Tomorrow is really short, and it shows exactly how Tinian can be a good writer. He just really lets me down a lot. But this is why I wanted him to get the freaking job in Detective, and now I hate his run. But I had hope. We get the first time with the bat signal going up, and I don't like his Tim Drake. I've never liked Tinian's Tim Drake. I know he loves that character, but I feel like his version of Tim Drake's just a douche. But man, is Jason Todd fantastic in this issue, where he's a Red Hood, and he's trying to. They're not actually Red Hoods, but they're like playing on that fear. And he and his friend are robbing a place, and he says his name to try and calm down someone who's scared, and his friend just shoots the person in the head. And so Jason beats him up over that, and like everyone else sees the bat signal, and Dick's just like, whoa, and Tim's like, that's so cool, and Barbara's inspired by it. And then Jason's is just ellipses. He's covered in the blood of an innocent person. And I just love that. And I've heard the Red Hood and the Outlaws issue tied in Zero Year, because every single map book had a Zero Year issue. The Nightwing one's fine. The Under the Red Hood issue, I've heard, I keep saying Under the Hood. Red Hood and the Outlaws issue apparently is absolutely fantastic and really heartbreaking. Like, an actually good issue from that book, which is saying something.
Yeah,
Lobdell wrote a quality issue. That is amazing.
Yeah. Lobdell, I have yet to read anything good that he has written.
Yeah. But anything to add on those?
Not really. You are right. There's some weird continuity stuff. I sort of see it as they needed to put out a Zero issue, and Snyder was toying with this idea, and this was kind of some scraps of his brainstorming sheet that manifested into a script, and kind of a pitch. Like, here's my pitch for what I could possibly do with a Batman origin story, and then they published it, and then he later kind of restarted it. And that was actually my main thing, was when I was first reading Zero Year, as it was coming out, as Secret City was coming out, I was thinking, okay, where does this Zero issue fall into Zero Year? And it doesn't. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because it does feel more like a pitch. As far as Tomorrow goes, I read that once. I remember what you're talking about. I think that what Tinian does that I think is, and I think a lot of backup stories fall victim to this, is it wants to show you everything. So we have to have Dick, we have to have Tim, we have to have Barbara, we have to have Jason, and I think maybe having it just be like Tim and Jason. Boom, right there. I think you could possibly have it be a little bit less tedious, because I think once you get the point of it, it gets a little stale.
Yeah, I mean, the Dick one's kind of interesting because he mentions that Bruce Wayne's going to go to a Flying Graysons thing the next day.
Right.
And so, oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Tim.
Yep.
Yeah, so Dark City.
This is where things get very scary. Don't read this.
This is where things get fucking awesome. The proto Batmobile, which, oh, another thing. In Secret City, the car that Thomas is working on is the original Batmobile from Detective Comics 27.
It's so cool.
It's the best thing ever. He just has the freaking red, like, whatever that car is, and it's so awesome. So it's the first car we see in Batman's origin. Well, maybe not the first one, but one of the first. Well, it's the first chronologically. Uh, but then the first actual Batmobile is just fucking cool. There's such a
It
consistent
is.
like gold and blue aesthetic in this. Like when Bruce has a hoodie in Savage City, it has like the laces are gold, and the rest is blue. I don't know why. I mean, I guess it's because the
Because Bruce
uh,
Wayne dresses in style. That's why. You gotta have his bling.
it's just a nice. It's not. Uh, it's just one random one he picked up. It's just for some reason the world keeps giving him the Infantino design colors,
Mm-hmm.
which is just
Yeah.
nice because in the New 52 he never had the Infantino costume, which I hate them for doing.
Yeah, the Infantino costume's awesome. I guess I'll be the dissenting voice. I think Dark City's the weakest story of the bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I think it's bad. I think it's a little too ambitious for 4 issues.
Yeah.
And I think that it sort of mirrors Dark City in its structure and how it sort of builds up a mystery over 3 issues. We get some backstory for some characters. Most notably here, we get it for Jim Gordon. And then...
That is the best part of this book for me.
It is. And then we have an oversized final issue where it all leads up to this big showdown. Now, I have no problem with that. The thing, though, is I think as a chunk all by itself, as 4 issues, it doesn't really carry a weight as well as Secret City and Savage City do. It feels this fits better as a piece of a larger whole, which it is. Don't get me wrong. But it does feel like the weak link here for me because those other 2 do stand on their own remarkably well as on top of being a part of a chain.
See, that's what's weird for me because you probably read this in monthly. I read this just in trade, so I got the full chunk of story all at once. So my pacing is a lit. I mean, I could kind of tell the differences in story, but it's sort of like, I'm reading this from beginning to end, so I'm getting 2 chunks of this at once.
Right. So you probably see this as 2 chunks. Well, I see it in 3 chunks. Is that maybe how you?
Kind of. I mean, I have 2 books here, so that's kind of how I read it in pacing wise. And I'm sure it's different when you read in trade, like I do.
Oh, definitely. It's a big difference. And the thing, though, I think is Snyder kind of goes back. I think he gets a little too comfortable here. And he kind of reverts back to some of his weaknesses. There is a lot of people explaining stuff.
Tokyo Moon gets TBS.
Oh yeah.
And I ain't talking about the Da Vinci Code explaining the plot while they're running to places thing. I'm talking thematic stuff. We have to explain why he's Dr. Death. We have to explain what the darkness in Gotham represents. We have to explain Batman's overconfidence. We have to explain it, and it just gets very tedious, especially towards the end. Now, the big Dark Knight Returns reference as he's like swinging in front of the lightning bolt, all of the big spectacle art stuff really hits home. But I think the writing isn't quite as strong as it was in Secret City, so those that homage and references feel a little bit more like look at me as opposed to a celebration the way they felt back in Secret City.
The one thing that works is he's the God-censored Batman.
Yes.
That was the best thing ever.
They somehow managed to make me find joy in a reference to All-Star Batman and Robin. All-Star Batman and Robin, for those who do not know, is the worst piece of fiction I have ever consumed in my life. I detest every soul-sucking panel of All-Star Batman and Robin. It is the most
There's one thing that I do like. There's a few panels that I will say are good, and it's the end of the Green Lantern issue when they go to the Graysons' graves and Bruce says, "We spend the whole night mourning lives lost, including our own." That is like the last little glimpse of like 1980s Miller.
Maybe. I think within the context of that story, it that sucked me dry. So, yeah.
I miss Frank Miller when he was good.
I do too. He had a
It's just
power.
sad.
If you guys want to read some good Frank Miller, Sin City is where you go. Sin City is awesome. So, Yeah, I think that so they managed to take something from All-Star Batman and Robin, the worst thing created by a human, and make it good. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
I'm trying to find that censor bar because I remember it, and I thought it was just funny.
Want to talk about Gordon?
Sure.
Yeah.
I like Gordon.
I really like the fact that we have a Gordon who comes to Gotham before Bruce shows up, and so because of that, he's a lot more cynical and is corrupt, and I really like that.
He's sort of like Batman Begins Gordon a little bit in terms of,
Definitely. And the Corrigan reference is nice. I'm confused as to what the point of that is, because I don't know anything about Jim Corrigan in the new continuity. But I would assume it's not a reference to Spectre Jim Corrigan. But have you read Gotham Central, Connor?
I have not yet.
Okay, so here's a random tangent. So there's a Jim Corrigan who's a ME for the GCPD in Gotham Central, and while never explicit in the book, he is a totally unrelated Jim Corrigan to the Spectre Jim Corrigan. Yet they're drawn exactly alike. And yet
that's
he's corrupt,
strange.
and it has nothing to do with the original. I won't spoil all the stuff that happens with him, but he's a corrupt cop. He's an absolute bastard, and I had to look it up to figure out what's happening. I assume this Dan Corrigan is supposed to be a reference to corrupt Jim Corrigan, but it kind of threw me off. But I like the fact that name is still there. But with the Gordon stuff, I really like this. I really like cynical Gordon. Like, he's even more cynical in Broken than the Gordon from Begins, and the whole story with coats and I love when Bruce holds the gun up to him and says this is what I remember about that night, staring down the barrel of a gun. It's that was brilliant, and the fact that he actually does not like Jim Gordon at all when they first meet is just, well, not when they first meet, but when he's Batman, is just fantastic.
Yeah,
and just the whole thing with the Pitbull, especially because we see Barbara later in the book, years later.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. And just that whole scene when Gordon's talking about it, it speechifies, but it makes sense, and they even play into that, where Bruce is able to put the glasses on him again, stuff like that. They play into the fact that he's getting lost in the story.
And I really like that when he's talking to Gordon, one of his eyes is fritzing out. And so one of his eyes is clear as he's learning the truth about Gordon, while the other eye is not clear. So he's in a transition. He's in a mode of transition.
Ooh, that's a good point. And just the whole thing with the coat, especially how it comes back at the end, is really nice. That's one thing I'll give Snyder. Until you get to Super Heavy, he really gets Jim Gordon.
Oh boy, Super Heavy is maybe my biggest guilty pleasure. I don't know if it's good, but I like it while I read it. Then the big action scene that precedes the scene we're talking about on the boat is really good, though. The scene where the FBI is ambushing him, sorry, not the FBI, the GCPD is ambushing Batman, is a fantastic action sequence that they are able to do. And that's the one thing that I think is, a lot of people read comic books for the action, right? You got superheroes, and they do their punching thing, right? You get some good action.
We want to see people beat each other up, dang it. That's why we read
exactly.
this stuff.
The thing, though, is I've read so many comics. Fight scenes feel so obligatory, and they feel like an obstacle in the way of the story so much of the time. Where, oh, look, it's a team-up, but first they got to hit each other a couple of times, and then they realize, oh, we're on the same team, let's team up, and then they punch the bad guys a little bit. And it's there's a significant lack of creativity, I feel. But reading these, and I think it is because Snyder does allow the situation to breathe more, and you're able to take in what's happening because Capullo's a master with his pencils, and because Danny McKee's inks are so dynamic, it is I can't stress this enough, some of the most thrilling action in a comic book. So if you do like action in your comics, this is mostly a dialogue-driven book, but the moments of action are so thrilling, and they add punctuation to the platitudes and to the talking and to all the thematic subtext and text that is going on in here, that it feels like the most earned action that I can think of in like contemporary DC comics.
Definitely. There were a lot of good action scenes in this. I think I did enjoy the boat. I also liked his fight with Dr. Death. That was both interesting. That was both creepy and thrilling at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the beginning when he's in Secret City when he's taking on the Red Hood gang, he's just about to drive right through them.
Yeah.
That was pretty awesome. Should we talk a little more about Dr. Death, or we covered him pretty well?
I like what they attempt with him and his backstory. I like the update. Too much feature fine. I don't know if he was utilized perfectly.
What was
It feels
Dr.
kinda like
Death
a
in the
deep
classic comics, to be quite honest? I wasn't sure. Is he a scary monster person, too?
No, he's just a mad scientist.
He's a guy with a monocle. You would love him. He has a monocle and a goatee.
Ooh, I like this guy already.
And what he does is he has his stereotypical turban-wearing sidekick. I forget what his first one's name is, but he goes up to people and sprays them with this toxin. And then Dr. Death sends them a letter that says you're going to die in like a week unless you pay me such amount of money, and I will give you the cure. If you go to the police, I'll kill you. And so he runs a whole racket that way. And then Batman snaps the neck of his first guy, and then another one just shows up the next issue, and it's never explained. And then like Batman catches him on fire, and in the first issue, Batman throws a fire extinguisher at him. Which then he tells Dr. Death, like, come on, get out of here. And Dr. Death is like, no, I won't let you win. And so out of spite, he lets himself burn to death. And Batman has to sudden enough death to Dr. Death. And then the next issue is Dr. Death returns. He comes back. And there's this whole thing of, like, Batman's like, okay, this has to be Dr. Death. But what the heck is going on? He doesn't, where is he? I thought he was dead. And we see him at the end of the issue, and his face is, like, very skeletal but green.
Yeah,
and
it's a scary green monster face. Yeah,
because his face got burned and affected by the chemicals, so it's all green and weird. And so then Batman throws him in jail. And then he shows up again later, post-crisis, as again with the monocle, and he's like trying to infect people through flu vaccines. And then he shows up again later with just a black gas mask. It looks pretty cool. So this was a big reinvention of the character.
Gotcha. I wasn't sure. This is a scary reinvention of the character. I know I keep saying that, but that's the thing that stood out to me. I said nothing stood out. I guess I'm wrong. Dr. Death did.
We have a thing with bones, so this is scary. I mean...
Exactly.
One thing that I really like, by the way, is in some of these panels when he's being ambushed, his mask is blue, and I like that a lot better than the black mask. I wish he had blue the whole time.
You cut out there a little bit for me. What did you say?
When he's being ambushed by the cops, his mask looks blue at some points, mainly because of the lighting. I kind of wish it stayed that way. Like, there's a panel when he's running away from them, his cape and cowl are blue, and it looks really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I also like how much he gets beat up in these stories.
Yeah, getting to see the wires inside the top of the mask is really cool. Like, to keep it in place.
Dr. Death, I think, is kind of the weak point for Dark City for me. He does a lot of talking. He's kept off page quite often, and there's a big mystery surrounding him, and I just don't really like the payoff. He just kind of does a lot of explaining his character thematics.
He kind of becomes Riddler's henchman by the end, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm okay with that much, unknowingly falling into Riddler's trap. We should probably talk about through all this point. There's been a subplot with the Riddler as an employee of Wayne, Philip Kane, Uncle Philip, and I like that his last name is Kane, and he's a douchebag.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, Uncle Philip means well. He's just kind of sinister, but he's trying to be a good person. But there's a really neat thing with the Riddler and the way he sort of takes control of not just Wayne, but over the entire city by the end of Dark City.
He's Bane
that
in
I
this
think
story.
he kind of is, and I really like how he has the piece of thread that has that super heavy rock attached to it, and when Gordon's like gonna take him in, and he talks about how like enough leverage and you can control anything, and all you have to do is let go of that leverage to have the heaviest object in the world fall. And I'm like, that's really kind of cool. It's a neat way to parallel his relationship with Philip Kane.
I like his
So-
conspiracy-looking kind of lair. With all the little
I do
wires
too.
and notes all connected.
There's a lot of detail there that Capullo has fun with.
Also, he gave Riddler sideburns. That is the greatest thing ever. He is
I
like
like that.
even more like a leprechaun. That's just great. Every time I read this, I hear him in a Irish accent.
Oh, do you?
Oh yeah, and Riddler with an Irish accent really works.
All right, let's get Ewan Bremner to play the Riddler in a movie. Or at least one of the guys from Train Spotting. Let's get one of them to be.
Technically not Irish, but somebody did say that Robert Carlyle should play the Riddler once.
Well, you know, Robert Carlyle was in Train Spotting, so... I mean, they're all Scottish, but, you know, same difference, right?
Robert
They share
Carlyle's
an
Scottish
island.
is
I don't think they'll see it that way.
But because Robert,
They share an island. They can get used to it.
Robert Carlyle is amazing, so he can do it no wrong in my eyes.
Something I really
Yeah,
like
he's
about this is Riddler's
pretty awesome.
mask changes.
I do, too. It's really neat.
He's working out the kinks, and I really like that. Yeah, Riddler, man, Snyder really has a good voice for Riddler. Like, he doesn't have a good voice for Joker, he doesn't have a good voice for most of the villains, but man, does his Riddler kick ass. And
His Riddler's amazing.
and like leading up to this, like there's always been this thing of no really great Riddler arcs. Like we've had stuff like Run Riddler Run, or Answer My Riddle, or Riddle Me This and Run Riddler Run, which are apparently really good. But they're like short, like miniseries or one shots and stuff like that. Never has there really been a massive Riddler arc that actually like was great. I mean, there's a 3-parter. I think it's 705 to 707 from Detective Comics during Dixon's run. By that, it's Riddler making a bunch of baseball-themed riddles. It's so fun. Clue Master's in it. It's just an absolute treat. But Snyder's the first person to, I think, really do a solid arc with Riddler throughout it. Because he's always, like, retconned in at the end, like with Hush. Like, oh, look, he was behind it all. We never really let him have an actual on it. Like, there's no push and pull with him in Batman.
I hate
this
how
really changes
everybody... I hate how everybody talks about Hush in, like, Riddler and Hush as, oh, he's so well written. No, he's not. Get out of here with that.
He gets, like, a
Dude.
scene.
He's in a scene, and he's so overwritten, and not in a good way. Oh, man. Hush sucks.
Yeah.
That's why I've never
Yeah,
read
so-
Hush.
Well, I'll say this much. I love the first half of Hush, and then you read the second half of Hush, and you realize none of it really holds together.
Like the
And
one
then
where
you-
Riddler has cancer or something, or...
Yeah.
Okay, I looked some stuff up, so I remember certain things. Since we're talking about Riddler, want to just get into the final arc,
Savage
Yeah.
City!
or as I like
Go.
to call it
Yeah,
now,
let's go.
A Dark Knight Rises, but with Bane, with Riddler instead of Bane.
Yes. So this is awesome. First off, I'm just going to say it. Batman fighting lions is maybe the best thing ever.
Yep.
I want to say that Commando Batman is my favorite Batman.
Oh, they made a figure of this, and I need it.
Dude, I've been wanting this action figure for years. I don't collect action figures. I don't. But I want it. I want it so bad. Commando Batman is the best Batman.
There's like 3 Zero-U action figures. I should buy all 3 of them and just paint one of them blue. Then I'd have the whole set.
One of them remind me a
That's
little
great.
bit of Mad Max too. Mad Max Batman.
Mhm.
He is, yeah. There's a lot of Mad Max influence here. There's No Man's Land influence, and I mean, I see a little bit of like I Am Legend with kind of the more, and I guess when you're talking like overgrown cities.
Right.
One thing that I wonder with this Riddler, and all the stuff about identity, do you think that this? And they say at one point that Edward Nygma, like, isn't on any files and stuff. Do you think that this Riddler is Edward Nashtian?
I
I
wouldn't
don't
know
know.
who that is, unfortunately.
The whole Edward Nashtian thing is that there's like a Joker origin story. I think it's either it's either Legends 50, which is Danny O'Neill's telling of the Joker's origin, or it's Batman Confidential.
So you're
I forget what the
thinking
Joker.
that the Riddler is going to become the Joker, or
No.
well, you said Joker origin story, so
Well, let me get to it. Or it's Lovers and Madmen. I forget which, but there's a Joker origin story in which the Riddler's involved and reveals to Joker that the people who work with the Red Hood gang who blackmail him killed his wife and kid, and to make him more desperate. And that there's a private eye called Edward Nashtian who changes his name to Edward Nygma by the end. And we've run with that in a few things. I think post-Crisis, it is retconned that he is in fact Edward Nashtian, changed name to Riddler, or to not Riddler, changed his name to Edward Nygma because he liked it. And Arkham Origins even has Bruce say that his name is Edward Nashtian, and that is like again it is originally Enigma and stuff. So there's always been this weird thing of the Edward Nashtian idea for the Riddler. I've never liked it, mainly because I like the self-fulfilling of he's named Enigma, and so he has this whole thing. Even in his first issue, there's a point about it where he's just like, "Well, my name's Edward Nygma, so I have to be good at puzzles." Like I forget what the exact psychological term is, but there is a psychological phenomenon with people with names that mean certain things becoming a certain way based on that, and the social like lexicon of like what certain terms mean, building upon that and changing as a person.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because the name Connor means like lover of hounds or like lover of wolves or something. And there are a few things I love on this planet more than dogs. So who knew?
Pat's the power of names.
I'm not even making that up. Like that's for real.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, maybe that's what they're going for, Red. I mean, they never stated anything, but
Yeah, I kind of right because I like the whole identity thing, and so he becomes Edward Nygma because he wants to be Edward Nygma. If I felt if Gotham did a really genuinely interesting thing with their Riddler and identity and his whole relationship with the Penguin, that show is fucking insane. But it's Riddler is the best, and his suit is the greatest suit ever, and I want it.
See, that's funny because I stopped watching in season 1, mostly because I thought Edward Nygma was the worst character on the show.
He was. Well, Barb was the worst. He was.
Well, yeah, no, he was the
but
worst.
he is
and then
just a
Fish.
treat.
Oh, he gets good.
Oh,
Okay.
Fish.
Okay, because
he is
here's the
just
thing.
so fun. He becomes best friends with Penguin,
Oh boy.
and it's the greatest thing ever. But then Penguin's in love with him and is like kills his girlfriend to get to make him fall in love with him. It's just a dark soap opera, and it's wonderful, and they know it. And they own
awesome.
it. They own the craziness. You need to watch season 3 when it hits Netflix.
criminal insane bros, man. Criminal insane bros.
So, okay, so yeah, me watching Gotham. Donald Logue's awesome. Ben McKenzie has the best Batman voice of them all. This city, I gotta protect it. You understand me? So, it's funny when Ben McKenzie's not doing animated Batman, he actually plays a pretty good Batman. So,
Yeah, seriously.
So, what's his name? But yeah, no, I thought the Riddler was obnoxious and annoying and the worst character in the show. Except, oh wait, There's Fish Mooney. She's the worst character on the show. Except, oh wait, Barbara's also in this show. She's the worst character.
Barbara becomes the best in the show by season 3.
Are you serious?
She is the Eric and Cap both agree with me on that she is the best character. It is the most fun. It's amazing.
Wow, because
watch season 3. It's so fun.
I don't get what it is. So I was like, when I first started watching Gotham, I was like, wow, that chick playing Barbara is super hot. And then like by the 4th episode, I'm like, I don't even care. Get her away. I hate her. But if she gets awesome, then that's awesome. Anyway, so
Riddler in this
is good.
I like the fact that Riddler makes the entire city green.
Yeah, that's a really fun thing. This is also the story that introduces Duke Thomas, who's like the worst character in all of DC Comics right now. And
now that Harper's gone.
Yeah, now that did she just get retconned out of?
I don't know. Which, by the way, Harper does make a cameo here, and she doesn't get mentioned by name, and I really like that because it's a subtle way to do it. So kudos.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, Harper was horrible. She was all over Batman and Robin Eternal, and like intrinsically tied to Cassie. And now they were just like, nope, fuck it, never mind.
Yeah, here's the thing about Duke. I think he sucks. He's like Jessica Cruz, the Green Lantern. So here's the thing. I've been watching a lot of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. recently, and I've just about had enough of those characters. So the thing about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I swear this is relevant, is they do this thing where they completely disobey authority constantly, where they're like, no, I'm going to do it my way. I'm an agent. So it's like this weird thing where people...
That is my biggest pet peeve with any story, is the, breaking ranks with no consequences. I hate it.
Every character breaks ranks, and especially when Coulson isn't even the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. anymore, he just starts breaking ranks and just doing whatever and flying by the seat of his pants. Well, the new director is like, hey, you can't do that. And he's like, hey, come on. I have my own thing. I need people to do this because I have a very clear chain of command that I need to do. And they go, no, I don't care. We have something we want to do. Get over it. And then all of a sudden they'll end up saving the day. So it's okay. They save the day. It doesn't matter that they broke ranks. And that's what Duke Thomas does. He's a character from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that wandered into a Batman comic. He's always like, look at Night of the Monster Man, where he's like, no, I want to be a Jedi now. Where, Obi-Wan? Where? Put me in the game, coach. Put me in the game. No, Duke. Hey, you want to help, Duke? Okay, Alfred is trying to whip up an antidote. Can you please help him out because you're good with that? No, that's not good enough, Batman. Shut up. Put me in there. I want to punch some aliens. I want to punch the monsters. Put me in the game.
Funny?
Oh, it's so
Monster Man is a ripoff of Attack on Titan, and Attack on Titan has a very clear do not break ranks thing. Like, they have an entire episode where a character wants to break ranks to save fellow comrades, doesn't, and gets rewarded for following orders. Like, that show is very firmly, you follow orders, you are a cog in a machine. Yeah, it sucks, but that's how a military functions, bitch. And that's
that's the Japanese
what it
for
needs
you.
to be. Yeah, like anime has a very strong sense of, like, even in stuff like freaking
you do not question
Full Metal Alchemist, where they have a military coup. It's a coup. They still believe in ranks. It's just they don't believe in that specific government.
Yeah.
Like, what is with Americans in this, like, defiance and revolution to the point of you're essentially creating a military with no loyalty whatsoever, and I hate it.
Because
Duke would not get the title of good soldier from Bruce at all.
No, he wouldn't. Duke sucks. Well, anyways, he's introduced here. He's just a quiet kid who kind of looks like a girl, and he just doesn't really talk much. So,
I could get into some theories as to why, but I don't want to turn this into a tangent about American and Japanese culture. But I could probably make a few arguments. Not why it's good.
I'm done yelling about Duke Thomas. He's here, and he's barely here. He's just kind of here to represent.
Let's get off yelling about Duke Thomas and start yelling about Duke Loops.
Hey. And start yelling about who?
Duke Loops.
Duke Loops from Geek Evolution.
So that's one of the things that was like, I like Duke here because he's just here to represent the people that Bruce is supposed to protect. That's all he's there. It's a very simple idea, and it works.
Making him Batboy ruins that.
Yeah, it does, because he doesn't look like he should when he's on the cover of National Enquirer. That's a
Wait,
reference to Bat Boy from the National Enquirer, to anybody who
Ah,
is curious about Bat Boy from National Enquirer.
we learn
I
something new
like
every
the I
day.
like the fact that the SWAT team doesn't get killed. Well, not the SWAT team, the government secret team. I'm sick of how every single time we do like in Dark Knight Rises, I hate how easily the FBI gets taken down. These guys actually survive the story.
I couldn't hear what you said about Dark Knight Rises. It
Uh,
was probably wrong, but I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry, Red.
the CIA. It's factually correct. The CIA gets taken down. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Gets taken down like 10 minutes after they show up in that movie.
Well, yeah,
like
that's because Talia alerts them. Duh.
I know why they get taken down. The fact that Snyder inverts that by having them actually make it through the story. I mean, I think they die by the end, but they actually they're literally faceless government agents who don't get killed immediately. That is really impressive.
It is.
They're like Wedge and Antilles. They survived the whole story against all odds.
See, but it would be more impressive if they were introduced in Secret City and were able to live through the flood and into Savage City.
Yeah.
It would be a whole battalion of wedges.
Oh, that'd be the best.
They'd call it the Full Orange. So what do you guys? So Riddler's awesome. I really like the crazy how Batman and Riddler really meet before they're Batman and Riddler at the Egyptian Sphinx thing. I just know I called it the Egyptian Sphinxter. But so the Egyptian Sphinx thing has a bunch of crazy radical lights going around, and it's like this weird tripwire thing, and they have to answer a bunch of riddles. It's really, really cool. And
whatchamacallit, it looks like a what's the term? The snake eating its own tail.
I believe you're looking for the term disco.
The
I hate myself right now. It's a fucking thingamajig. That's the technical term, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I do like the riddles they come up with, though. They come up with really good riddles.
Oh yeah, and it's just such a cool Ouroboros.
Ouroboros. There we go.
Ouroboros. There we go. That's what it is. Yeah, that thing. It's not actually one, but it looks. I like how that comes back. That this player doesn't know that he's Bruce.
Ooh, you're cutting out, Red.
I actually kind of wish he had known. I'm kind of shocked that this Riddler doesn't know that it's Bruce.
Yeah.
I was surprised a few people didn't figure it out. For some reason, I felt like Gordon would when I was reading it. Especially after he finds.
Yeah, I guess you are right. Yeah, there aren't a whole lot. I kind of like that. Not a lot of people know that he's Bruce by the end. You are right. You'd think in a story like this, a bunch of people would find out, Joel. But
Gordon kind of know.
I mean, I've always got that sense that maybe he did, especially when he sees Bruce coming out of that cave.
Maybe.
Well, it's the code more than anything.
So Batman fighting lions is the coolest thing ever.
Of course.
It's great. He fights with. He doesn't just bear wrestle them. He uses fire to his advantage. He burns half of a lion's face off. It's awesome. Yeah, that scene's awesome. And I really like the stuff with Alfred. The whole when he sees Julie Madison at the end and he's having that whole daydream about her. Oh my god! Every time I almost cry. I get goosebumps. My heart swells. It's so sad. And then we get that great final page of him flying above rooftops with an owl. And I like a lot of the setting. There's owls in the architecture. I really like the Court of Owls reference while Gordon's climbing the building. I think that's pretty cool.
Also, we get to see Bruce with a mustache.
Nice.
See, Bruce has the
Yeah,
Thomas mustache.
It's funny
Yeah.
though, because Joel Madison is my favorite Batman love interest. I will go that far. I think she is definitively the best, and yet I don't like Snyder's take on her.
Yeah, she's kind of a weird, like, hippie college student.
Yeah, and it's weird and super heavy as well. I feel like I don't like the fact that she's in this because the whole point of Julie Madison as a character is null and void in this story, because the whole idea, especially in the Morrison and stuff, is Bruce at first tries to have both happiness as Bruce Wayne and Batman because he thinks they're different people. And the whole point is when Jolie leaves, and there's that great thing in Last Rites when Jolie keeps trying to talk to Bruce and calls off their engagement and everything, and it's not till 8 months later till Bruce even realizes she's gone, where he's like, hey, tell her to break it off. And he's like, she's been gone for 8 months. Bruce is like, it's better this way. Now I don't have to see the look in her eyes that says she was right about me. And like that whole thing. And then, of course, he finds Robin. The whole point being Jolie Madison represents kind of him thinking Bruce Wayne is dead, and then Robin's the realization of, oh, wait, Bruce Wayne isn't dead. And that's kind of that whole idea. He goes through that without her here, so it's pointless to have her in the story because her function as a character is null and void.
I think it's a different version of that character, though. I don't, like... The thing is, you could also read Julie as a possible future, and I think here she is represented as a possible future. I think there's so many balls in the air going on here that adding a Julie Madison thread, we get a little setup with her, and then we get a payoff, and I think that's all we need for this story.
I can see that. I mean, that's kind of how that's what Alfred's thinking, at least, of what he wishes Bruce could have found his happiness.
Also, to get onto Super Heavy, I know you don't. It's obvious that you don't like that, do you?
Well, it's kind of like saying, do you like polio? No, it's kind of redundant.
So here's the thing about Super Heavy, though. I really like the way we leave Julie with Bruce's brick in the wall. I think that's great. I think that's an awesome way to end the story. But, yeah.
Anything else we haven't talked over?
I like the way that Batman beats the Riddler. Alexander the Great's like my favorite historical figure, and so I knew what was coming the moment he said he was talking about the Gordian knot. But I just love the fact that Batman wins with a punch while being smarter than the Riddler.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's simultaneous, and it's the greatest thing. It's the most satisfactory panel ever. Just Riddler's smug bitch face getting punched.
Watching a smug face getting punched is always happy. It's always a good thing.
When Bruce gets like electrocuted to death, he dies, right? I'm not missing that. He actually does like die.
Like would be pronounced dead. Yeah, he's brain dead first. Dead.
Yeah. Okay. So there's 2 solid pages of nothing but black.
Well, except for...
I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of narration over in the corner. But for all intents and purposes, it's just 2 black images from mostly from a writing standpoint, but also from an art standpoint. So I took Kelly Sue DeConnick's comic book writing course a few years back. Because I live in Oregon, and Oregon is where you want to be if you want to get into the comic book industry. So take that, Hollywood. But she said that she didn't give any examples, but I think she's talking about this comic book issue, where she says that she recently read a comic, and this is back in 2015. She said, last year, which would be 2014, I read a comic where there were 2 solid black pages, and she says, I hope to God those people didn't get paid for those pages. So I think she's talking about Scott Snyder, but I could be entirely wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting that Batman's last words are no. It's a 2-letter word, just like how his last words not really his last words, but his last words when he dies in Endgame are, like, his last words he leaves beyond the grave are, ha.
Mm.
Which the
Oh, that is
explanation for is weird, but I love just the idea of that. Just, ha, all in it. Endgame got to me when I first read that. I know people hate it. That's like the one Snyder thing I absolutely love other than Zero Year.
Well, I thought you
what do
said
you
you
like?
have a Endgame. I thought you had a
I
love-hate relationship with it,
I
Red.
said when I was reading it.
Oh, okay.
Like, I loved that so much. And then I hated it. Then I loved it. Then I hated it. I don't know what's going to happen when I go back and reread it.
Yeah, so Endgame is a thing that everyone was hyping up for like months. It was sort of like the anti-year one where we didn't really we knew what we were going to be getting. We were going to be getting a Batman origin story, and I was not excited for it. And then I read it, and it blew me away. And then there was Endgame, which was directly following up Zero Year, and they were saying we're not going to tell you anything. And then I thought, okay, so it's going to be the Joker story follow up to Death of the Family. That's what it's going to be. But they didn't tell us anything about it. There was nothing but like confidence, like cock hanging out of your pants confidence. And I picked it up and read it, and I went, this is it? This is it? It was just like a generic Batman has to stop Joker from gassing the city, except arbitrarily, this gas is now the most deadliest gas ever that we just can't find an antidote for. I was like, this is what they came up with? I'm really bored. And I liked like issues 2 and 3 of that, but 4 and 5 and 1 and 6, I just was so over Zero. I was so over Endgame, and I feel like it took a step back from I feel like what they had accomplished with Year 1 or Zero Year.
Yeah, and looking back on it, that story is really flawed. Especially becoming, like reading Tom King's run, and his outlook on Batman differs a lot from Endgame's. And more being a fan of the Bat God idea, I just don't like Endgame from like a personal level. But when I first read it was just a really interesting book read. Mainly because those backup features that are really solid, which again were proof to me that Tinian could write, and then he totally let me down. He can. I'll give that guy this much. He writes the Joker better than Snyder does. Like a great moment when he's leaving, and the doctor's like, "Where are you going?" And the same place I always go. That chill going down the back of your spine, where the dark things, or that chilling place in the back of your head where the dark things hide. And then he just disappears, and you question it, and he's like, "You have 4 bullets. There's 5 people. See how many you use, and then you hear a bang, and you have to question if she shot herself." I love that. So fucked up. Yeah, this story.
I forgot about this.
Yeah, they were like the one thing that I think still kind of holds up for the most part. Just all those people with different interpretations of the Joker's origin. And this is a backup feature of Harper and Cullen. I did not read it.
Yeah, you're probably not missing anything.
That's what people say when Harper's not in the story. Probably not missing anything.
So
do you guys have any more thoughts on Zero Year?
I can't think of much. I thought it was good. I'm afraid I can't put it like in my top 20 or any. Maybe not top 20, but
Do you have 20 Batman comics you've read?
No. I probably don't even have 5, sadly. But maybe I do. I don't know. I'll have to count. But it's definitely fun. I don't know if I'd go back to it a lot compared to some of the other ones I have with me. But I definitely enjoyed it, and like Red said, it's a good, solid story, and there's a lot of nice references to like past Batman things, stuff that I didn't notice, sadly, because I'm not that ingrained compared to you guys, but I've noticed a few things here and there, just from my limited knowledge, and I just really enjoyed it. It was, like Red said on Twitter, it was a solid story. That's probably the best praise I could give it, and I know I sound like I didn't like it the most, but that's as much as I can say. Red?
That's fair.
How about you go, and then Connor, we can finish.
I really like Zero Year, and rereading it again was cool. It's funny, I've been rereading my comic book collection this summer, and went through Daredevil. I have 10 issues left in what I have of O'Neill's Iron Man, And honestly, all I want to do right now is just read a bunch of Batman comics because of this. It's so just invigorating with that just sense you get when you read a Batman story. And it just captures such a really cool part of the character, even though it's not specifically my Batman. But that's kind of why I like it. I like having that be challenged. And the fact that it's something unique and different, and it's derivative in certain parts, but in an interesting way, as opposed to the rest of Morrison's run, where I'm like, I'm not going to read Death of the of Snyder's run, where I'm not going to read Court of Owls. I'll read Black Glove. I'm not going to read Endgame. I'll read maybe the Joker arc from Nightfall. I'm not going to read Death of the Family. I'll set myself on fire. The alternatives. There's better alternatives to each one of those. Specifically, Death of the Family are super heavy. I'd rather stub myself in my toe. There's better things to do than read those in some cases. Not that all of them are trash. Just there's alternative stories to read. But with Zero here, there's a specific flavor to it that you can't get from other stories. I think we should end with ranking our different Batman story, maybe origin stories. Year One is still a story I prefer. Man Who Falls, it's hard to judge a one-off thing that's not even technically a comic, really. But Man Who Falls, I kind of prefer on some levels, at least just in terms of personal taste and how I prefer my Batman origins. The origin in Batman Begins, I prefer. But at the same time, none of those replace this. When I want to read this, I read this. It's not like, with Court of Owls, again, I'll just read the Morrison one. I'll just read R.I.P. and Black Glove. With this, I can't get this flavor of Batman in any other story, even across all the origin stories I know. Love Untold Tales of Batman, it's a different kind of origin story. Well, I mean, it's not technically an origin story, but it's a retelling. And from a flashback perspective, it's just such a unique thing, and that's why I go back to it in the way I don't to the rest of Snyder's run.
So a lot of people do think that Court of Owls is a lot like Black Glove. I mean, Morrison's run is something I love, but I actually think there's plenty of difference between Black Glove and Court of Owls. If I had to rank my favorite Batman origin stories, I think Year One is overrated, but undeniably influential. Batman, Who He Is and How He Came to Be would probably be just above that, which is it gets the Batman origin story done in 2 pages. Mm-hmm. Great, that's what I love. Then my second favorite Batman origin story would probably be Batman Begins, and my favorite Batman origin story is Zero Year. I guess I'd just like to finish off with saying this. Scott Snyder, this is my open letter, not even really a letter, this is my open improv message to you. Thank you for Zero Year. This is something that means a lot to me. This came to me at a very impressionable, important time in my life. This is something I'm always going to hold in my heart. This is one of the best reading experiences I've ever had. One of the best experiences I've ever had while experiencing fiction or any kind of media. I'd put this up there with some of my favorite movies. I'd put this up there with some of my favorite music. This is among my favorite comic books, and this is my favorite Batman story. Thank you so much for this something special you made. I think this is an even better origin story than Batman Begins, which came to us from Christopher Nolan, my favorite living director. I guess he might be up there with my favorite living director. Thank you so much for the labor of love that you and Greg Capullo put into this book. I will cherish it for the rest of my days. Thank you very much, Mr. Snyder.
Well, that's a way to end a review podcast, and if Ian's video taught me anything, is that Scott Snyder does watch YouTube videos from time to time. So maybe I'll get a comment from him. That would be awesome.
Just take that, cut it out, and then make it its own video, and everyone tweet it at Scott Snyder.
I wish I could.
Everybody do it.
I'll definitely try to find the timestamp.
But I guess I'll do my rank. For me, I'd honestly say Batman the Return. The first 5 pages of that make me tear up every single time, especially when he outright quotes and thus is born this weird figure of the dark, this avenger of evil, the Batman, which comes straight from who he is and how he came to be, which is second on my list. Man Who Falls is third. Begins is fourth, because Begins taught me that what themes and ideas were in a work. And then under that is 0 Year. And then there's like 20 other stories that I could name that I'm not going to. Which sounds like I'm putting that low, but again, I love pretty much every Batman origin story. It's a thing I could read through, like, all of them.
I haven't
just
seen...
such a good story, and it's kind of Snyder's magnum opus in a really big way.
No, I hear ya. I haven't read many Batman origin stories, sadly, so Synder is probably gonna be at the bottom just because I like some other stuff more. So probably be Batman Begins. This is gonna be a little bit of a cheat, but I'm gonna put the flashbacks from Mask of the Phantasm, because that goes into origin. I know that doesn't count, but I really love that movie. Then probably Year One, and then 0 Year at the bottom, but only because I kind of always liked the idea of a Gotham that starts out more gritty and crime-oriented with the mob bosses, and then slowly over time becomes more like Crazy Town.
I see a mob boss, he just gets shoved out of the window of a plane.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, that's probably my ranking just by default.
Oh, and this on a random nitpick. Harvey Dent isn't mentioned at all. Oh, Pam Isley gets a cameo.
Oh yeah, the funny.
Yeah.
But Harvey Dent doesn't get anything, which is really good restraint on Snyder's part. So that's my open letter to Scott Snyder. Thank you for showing restraint with that, because everyone loves to shove Harvey. Other than this and Origins, both came out around the same time. Both were capable of doing a Batman origin story or early day story without being like, Harvey Dent, look, half his face is cast in shadows. Look.
Dude,
so,
we're being
good restraints.
Symbolism.
Hiya, Bruce. How you doing? Have you seen my coin?
Dun dun dun. But yeah. And I think that's gonna do it. So thank you everybody for joining me. Thank you too for joining me. And until next time, see ya.